and welcome to the NewsX Sunday Guardian Roundtable. Well, the Modi government has finished 8 years in office, 3 years of its second term. There have been a lot of press conferences, a lot of touting of the achievements, and a lot of discussions into what is the big takeaway. That's the one thing that I've not been able to find is the big takeaway of the Modi government. We hear things about how there's been COVID management, there's been, the welfare schemes, etc. But what we were expecting from Modi, that big ticket reform, the economy, there are a lot of areas that haven't happened. At the outset, there is a thought that I like to leave with my panelists. For me, the biggest takeaway really is that the death of the opposition. We've really seen not just one party rule, but the beginning of one return of the one man rule, really. There's just nowhere has the opposition been decimated so comprehensively as it has during Prime Minister Modi's time. Is there any hope for the opposition? And also, where is this government headed? That is something we're going to be discussing as we take into account the 8th anniversary of the Modi government. Joining me is Dilip Cherian. He's an image guru. He's also a political commentator and analyst. Tehsim Poonawalla is a lawyer and a Congress supporter. Sanjay Jha, he's also a Congress supporter, though he's a suspended member, but definitely heart and sympathy is with the Congress party, maybe not with the current Congress leadership. So Dilip, really your first takeaway, first let's just talk about the government, Modi government. Is that you do image and branding. If I was asking you to do the marketing for the Modi government, the campaign, what is the one big thing you would highlight?
I would certainly begin by graciously declining a task which I think the government is doing extraordinarily well. This government cannot be faulted on its ability to communicate. They communicate on every occasion. And in fact, their masterstroke of having all the ministers head to the districts to listen to Prime Minister Modi when he makes his major speeches is the kind of communication that others would, find it difficult to emulate, because there is a hagiography of leadership. There's a kind of powerful narrative that is being set every day. Agree with it or disagree, you cannot escape it. So I think that this is probably the government which has been able to carry its own conviction into every single action that it initiates. We may have arguments about the content of it. We may have arguments about the appropriateness of it, the extent of heart in it. But the narratives they push are one India, nationalism, to show united. All these you cannot.
Sanjay, you've been doing a lot of podcasts also on this. I've been seeing them. So, your first take on the achievement, apart from great communicators, but what is the one big thing they should be communicating?
Priya, in my opinion, Mr. Modi's government's biggest legacy to India as on date, it might change for the better or worse in the coming 2 years, is that India has become socially fractured, economically impoverished, institutionally emasculated. I completely agree with Dilip that, end of day, this entire government is like snake oil salesmen. And, they are spinning yarns day in and night out. Now, let me be a little charitable and say that despite a disastrous start to the GST, ultimately they managed to perhaps get it done. So let's give them some brownie points there. The Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code is a good initiative that, as Urjit Patel of the RBI himself said, that the government asked them to actually dilute the law so that some others who were perhaps, closer to the government were favored. These are symptomatic of flaws in the way governance is done. And I do believe that, Mr. Modi was talked about for governance, but under this regime, governance is a sham. Nothing better explains that than the way COVID was managed in India. It's very easy for them to today ridicule the WHO allegations that roughly 4 million people died in India. But let me tell you, you can't ignore those numbers. And Priya, you're in the journalistic fraternity. You'll be aware as to how the outlook was hounded, and the editor later on had to leave because of that cover story, which was basically about the number of people who have died in India during the second wave. So I look at Mr. Modi's government and I say this new India is dangerously polarizing. And I think, all of us on the show, Sandeep, Tehseen, yourself, Dilip, we are all people who have been experienced in public life. And let's not try and shy away from biting the truth. And the truth is, I've never seen India so divided that today, I don't know whether Tehseen feels it, but when I meet people, they are constantly obsessed with this binary of the Hindu Muslim politics, and now it's becoming part of our social existence on a day-to-day basis. So these are things that worry me.
I'd also like to welcome Sandeep Ghosh. He's an editorial writer, a political commentator, and he has his own video blog also. But Tehseen, first, let me bring you into this conversation. But one thing I would like to add to what Sanjay said, and maybe you can take it up, Tehseen, is this hounding of the press. It's a little more focused right now, but Congress did it also. Even during Vajpayee's time, Outlook was raided. So I think there is, I think when people get to power, it's a whole different story when they're out of power, and they turn around when they get into power.
So let me address that first, because that's a question you raised, Priya. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that the Congress did not do it or previous governments did not do it. In fact, Congress brought in the emergency. But the Congress has apologized for it, A. And you remember sometime when Prime Minister Manmohan Singh was in power, when the UPA 1, UPA 2 was in power, you guys routinely criticized, not just criticize, all your editorials were anti-government. And you all had no fear. There may have been a call from that, please take our version of the story, try and drop it. But at no point were you scared. Today, we know the one gentleman in the Prime Minister's office who sends daily briefings to editors and tells them what to run at 9 p.m. And we all know it. Let's not pretend that does not happen. We know that happens. And we know the sequence that will happen. Every time the Prime Minister or the government is in trouble, there are stories. It'll either be Shashi Tharoor or Robert Vadra. Then there'll be a slightly higher story of Pakistan and Dawood Ibrahim. And then there'll be a corruption story against the opposition. And if nothing seems to work, the final story is the Prime Minister's life is in threat. You know how this pattern works. We know it. This has never happened. Yeah, it's never happened before. I remember, I know a very famous stand-up was telling me that at 9 p.m. and 10 p.m., he would routinely mock the Prime Minister when UPA was in power. And today, you don't have the guts to do it. So that is a marked difference. So let's not say that this happened before. It's not happened at the scale and the perversion at which it's happened now. Now, let me address the other issue.
Let me just interrupt you. I'll come back to you. But I'll tell you what used to happen as a journalist from my point of view. Let me just tell you guys.
Sure.
What happened, emergency, of course, is a different story. But let's take the UPA years. What has happened then was whenever there was a story written either about Ten Janpath or Rahul Gandhi, no one officially reacted to it. They would just not react. And as you know, there was a huge division between Manmohan Singh and the rest of the cabinet. So they were very happy to see Manmohan Singh pull down. But if I wrote a story against Chidambaram, Kapil Sibal, Jairam Ramesh, even Subbi Rami Reddy, my editor would get a call. They didn't mind it if I wrote a story against Sonia Gandhi or Manmohan Singh. But if I targeted any one of these characters, these gentlemen, or anyone, any cabinet minister by name, I took these names because these people have made calls. My editor would get a call. So they were more worried about their own image than the image of the party and the government. Here, it's the other way around. Everybody is running around looking after Modi's image and the government's image. That's why the difference. But Tehseen, back to you.
No, I absolutely agree with you. And this is something I've said repeatedly to the Congress's top leadership. This is something I've said repeatedly to everybody. And I admit to it that the UPA 2 in particular, people were very busy looking after their own images. And some of the stories planted against even the Gandhis and even Dr. Manmohan Singh was done from the UPA people. So there is a difference in the two governments, but the hounding didn't happen. When you could write stories against Robert Vadra. You can't write against Jay Shah. You know what will happen. You know how publication is suffering. So we know the truth. Now let's come to the issue at hand. What is Mr. Modi and this government's achievements in 8 years? My answer is same as this government's economical knowledge, zero. They have achieved zero. There is nothing I can give them credit for. And I'll tell you why I'm saying this. Every single issue that the Prime Minister or this government has celebrated has fallen flat on on their face. 370. Look at what's happening to our Kashmiri Hindu fellow citizens right now. The demonetization. Look at what's happening. The economy for the first time is contracting in 50 years, highest joblessness in 45 years. And to divert from all these pressing issues of our time, Prime Minister's office is removing stories of Hindu-Muslim division. So I absolutely agree with Sanjay. The short-term gains to the long-term pain is going to be tremendous. Hindu-Muslims now become a vocabulary. We've started seeing the other as an other, and this division has been seeped into our society by none less than the present union government, only for short-term gains.
Pretty harsh, but I think in a way, this is something, the concern that has been voiced by many quarters. Sandeep, your take on the achievements, the one big thing that will strike you in the last 8 years that the Modi government has done, positive or negative?
Positive, I can count a lot more, and I think I will just, there's no point in getting into this exchange. Personally, I believe that, okay, if Tehseen and others feel so strongly about Modi government, every achievement has fallen flat on its face, and they don't have any knowledge about whether it's economics or anything else. I think they are underestimating the intelligence of the general public. It's possible to carry on through PR or any kind of, if you call it propaganda or anything, for a few years, but not certainly 8 years. And 8 years doesn't mean that there has been only one check or one test. There have been several tests through the 8 years across the country. And it has been tests which has been to some extent volunteered by the ruling party, every election or referendum Modi, and vice versa. Opposition has tried to make every single election something about Mr. Modi. So if they have, got ratified in 8 years' time, I think it'll be unfair to call the public being so foolish as not to realize these things. Whether it's Article 370 or GST or anything else, it's very easy to start saying it's fallen flat on its face, but GST today we are seeing what kind of results it is providing. We know how much of UPI transactions which are happening today. All these have a certain impact. Now, if we want to deflect that with certain, shall I say, perceived issues about, let's say, press freedom, I was quite amused to say, oh, Congress did it, but they apologized later. Modi can apologize 2 years later, and then we'll absolve him of whatever he has done. That's not the argument. But today, sitting in Delhi, you people are blissfully oblivious about what's happening at a state level. At certain states, assuming what you're saying in Delhi, this is happening. What is happening at certain states, including the Delhi capital, from what one hears with the state government, is far worse. There is no, level of physical intimidation where people might feel, a journalist or even an editor might feel physically intimidated, or their personal. They may be told that, okay, tomorrow you may be Ruben Banerjee, assuming again that's happened like that, would have lost his job. But Ruben Banerjee did not feel physically threatened as some editor to have stepped down because he was afraid of being behind bars, despite being an iconic. So these are, I think, to some extent deflection, just like we are seeing today, the emergency or the previous period in perspective. Even if that is happening today, people will, I think, over a period of time, that will be seen in a perspective. Where I do feel the Modi government has failed in the last 8 years is this hostility which has been generated with all regional parties. And that is deflecting the attention from a lot of its achievement. Now, why it has been done, who's at fault? I would think that, it takes two hands to clap. Now, after 8 years, I would say that, if Modi government says, or Modi says that he is still is not acceptable to the opposition, and they have not been able to reconcile themselves to his being the Prime Minister of the country, I think that needs to be examined a little more, critically. Because just as, let's say, Modi might have said that 8 years ago, he was not accepted in the global arena as India's Prime Minister. If he has managed to get accepted there in 8 years, he should get a similar level of acceptance from his peer group in India. Could be one, Sonia Gandhi family are against him, but yeah, you cannot really have a confrontationist attitude with all the government. I think that is one. Secondly,
That's
if indeed there is this feeling of a religious divide, even that is perceived or whatever it is, I think that the government needed to apply a healing touch, take a reconciliatory or some kind of approach to see that that doesn't fester into a larger problem. These are
okay.
things which on the softer side I would consider as drawbacks of the Modi government.
That's a very
Yeah.
balanced. No, I'm just going to take a break and
sure.
come back, and we'll just take a short break. Hello and welcome back to the NewsX Sunday Guardian Roundtable. We are here discussing the 8 years of Modi government, and I would just like a short 2-minute rebuttal from everybody on the conversation that has happened, because we're kind of running out of time also. So, Dilip, I'll begin with you. Tessim, I'll come to you.
Sure, sure.
So,
I think Sandeep's points are valid, and recognizing the two huge shortcomings are important. We also need to look at this from the perspective of two issues which we not have the time to discuss in detail, but need to be flagged off. One is the actual state of anxiety about the economy. And the second is the relationship with our neighbors and its implications for India's long-term future. Both of these, I think, merit a lot of attention, because, what is happening to the economy in its onward march towards the 5 trillion mark is something that needs to be watched with a lot of attention, because many of the figures are not standing up to scrutiny when they are examined again. And the second thing is that the pain that you feel already in small and medium scale industries is going to spill out at some time, even before the problem of underemployment, unemployment, and lower expectations of future employment begin to be a factor which affects us societally. So, and the China issue is the elephant in the room, but I think that would take far too long to discuss on a platform like this just now. But we will need to examine this very soon. I'll stop here.
thank you, Dilip. And I think you raised some very valid points, especially, India's relationship with its neighbors and the economy. Sanjay, that's your strong point also, talking, on the economy. Is that the biggest fall guy in the Modi government, the economy?
Yeah, Priya, I'm so astonished that there is one industrialist who overnight has become the country's biggest cement manufacturer, who probably commands airports under his suzerainty. And nobody's talking about it. This is, symptoms of the worst form of crony capitalism. And Mr. Modi is getting away scot-free. Electoral bonds, who funds these political parties? Where is the BJP getting money from? So when I hear about governance in Mr. Modi's government, you can only laugh, because these are like blatant, brazen manipulation of institutions in India. Nobody can defend that in the right senses. And I believe, Priya, the bulldozer is a manifestation of the authoritarian culture we have in India. It's not an elite, criticism to say India has become an illiberal democracy. It is intolerant about religion, about freedom. It's a fact. You can't deny that. We are a divided society. This is Mr. Modi's legacy. And, you can win elections. I agree with Sandeep that yes, winning elections appears to be a referendum. But let me tell you, you can't sustain societies when they are unequal, when they're divided, when they are polarized on a regular day-to-day basis. And therefore, this, deadly cocktail of Hindutva and hyper-nationalism works when you control, mass media and influence your social media trolling. But all these things have limitations, Priya. My last line, when the Prime Minister of this country is obsessed with the phantom of Aurangzeb, you know that India is not looking into the future. It is regressive and looking into the past. And look at the one reality, right? Today, after having removed a couple of Rajya Sabha MPs, 14.5% of India has a Muslim population, but the BJP will not have a single member of parliament who's a Muslim from either the Lok Sabha or the Rajya Sabha. They might make one nomination here and there, but this is, I think, in my opinion, a very barefaced and naked sectarianism that we are being told, just live with it, ladies and gentlemen. And I think this is not what a constitutional democracy or an inclusive country India was meant to be in 1947.
Tessim, your take. I know you have a lot of rebuttals also.
No, I'm just going to be quick. If Sandeep says that winning elections is the only and ultimate barometer, for 55 years, the Congress won elections and governed, then why does Mr. Modi say that 70 years, 55 years, nothing happened? Look, what Sanjay and Dilip are saying is very articulate, and I'm speaking on the economy. The government simply does not understand macroeconomics, and their policy on it is so muddled, so muddled. Look at Web 3.0. They have no idea on what Web 3.0 is. They don't know how to work. They've completely ruined the entire gaming industry. One day tax, one day GST, they've ruined the entire blockchain industry because they have no policy. Their only policy is put Narendra Modi ji's face and try and take credit for it. Sandeep said that, look, the prime minister is being, people are not accepting with the prime minister. He's our prime minister, but he's the man who goes and makes speeches of Shamshan Kabristan. No other prime minister in the history of this country has done it. He's the man who goes and says, Dangayo ko apne kapdon se pehchana jata hai. No other prime minister in the history of this country has made speeches like this. He's a man who can fall down to any level to make his point. And to my last point, the entire summary of this 8 years can be put up in 2 examples: the vaccine and the wheat policy of the government. The prime minister first goes to Davos and says India defeated COVID without vaccines, then says India is going to become the hub of exporting vaccines, then stops exporting vaccines to the world despite international commitments. Same with wheat, tells that India is going to export wheat to the world, then the next day stops exporting wheat. So he doesn't know what he's saying. So when you make international commitments, you're putting your country down, and when there is something good, he'll be there to take credit. When it's at fault, there are others to blame. It doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like that.
Sandeep, you know what is coming out from the whole conversation? The one big thread is of narrative management. You know, as Tessim said, he's there for the good news. He disappears when there's bad news, and he's a great communicator.
See, I think those are very, very simplistic, explanations. Just like Rahul Gandhi or Sri Rahul Gandhi ji, as Tessim would call him, saying that, oh, give me the media and I will defeat Modi in one day. You know, those are, I think, very, very simplistic situation. Explanations to the whole thing. It doesn't work like that. And whether Modi's, Mr. Chidambaram said that, his macroeconomic knowledge can be put on a postage stamp, and Tehsin is saying it's even smaller. These are arguments, certainly Tehsin may be an economic expert. I wouldn't hazard a comment there. My feeling is different. As far as jobs are concerned, or unemployment, or micro and small industries, there also I've got a different view, because a lot of people are who say this, including my due respects, Dilip. I don't know how much of that is really borne out at a ground level, which is there. The nature of jobs are changing. The nature of industry is changing. And if people, again, one of the things which the surveys throw out, even as there is unemployment today, who gives a greater hope for employment tomorrow or improve the state of this thing? It is still the Modi government. That's what surveys are showing over and over again. So we can, between the 4 of us, can draw that conclusion. So I think, anybody who is totally writing off, I certainly didn't say elections are the only test, but I have said elections have repeatedly proved that. It is not just one election of 1984, Congress coming back with 402 seats. That is not the yardstick. There have been, in this 8 years, there have been several elections and several other things. As far as Modi's international image in terms of whether management of the economy or management of COVID, these things are also, you cannot suppress it with a few articles by Rana Ayub and others in Washington Post or, New York Times. These things will also, surface. That is where the negative narrative management is failing. I think there, but there are issues, and issues will be there. We are not in the normal times as far as the world is concerned, as far as India itself is going through a churn. And during the churn, certain people, everybody won't be satisfied. But I think Modi will be judged by posterity. And there are a lot of us who feel in posterity will judge him much more kindly than this. A few of us elite critics are judging him today.
Okay. Dilip,
I am
quick
not elite.
last.
I'm
You're
not
not
elite.
but you're
I
a
am
critic.
very grounded. I'm a realist.
Okay, on that note, Dilip, quick last word for you. The whole narrative then it seems to be, Modi centric, Modi dominated. So what can defeat Modi will also be then Modi only some of his own policies. There's no opposition really.
I think the lack of opposition is probably is both the work of Modi's politics as well as the harakiri of the opposition itself. So that I don't think we can put on Modi's doorstep. But what we do know is that narrative management can carry you for a long time, but reality bites.
Okay. On that note, thank you so much for a reality check out here on this show. Thank you all for participating and thank you for watching this show.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.